Have you ever had those really big beef dino ribs, they call them? The kind that's like the Fred Flintstone tip your car over kind of thing? Well, that's what these are. I picked these up at Restaurant Depot. This is 13 and a quarter pound. It's two sets of ribs, so it's three bones each. And when I cook them, they're going to be all this meat is going to plump up and get to be these great big beef ribs. So I'm looking forward to cooking them because Richard's cooking again. Okay, so let me show you what we're working with here. I mean, these are gorgeous. You can just see these have just some fantastic marbling throughout. So when these cook, all of that fat is going to render down and soften up and just permeate through and make these just so juicy. These are like brisket on a stick. Now I will be doing some trimming. I'm going to pull off the membrane on the back here because I mean it's going to be hard to chew through. Cut off some of this obvious fat here and do some of that. Flip it over. I'm going to score some of the back and cut some of the silver skin and stuff, but I'm going to leave some of the fat on there, and it'll cook down nicely. You're going to lose a lot of that fat, and the whole thing is going to shrink up. These are 3-bone ribs, 1, 2, 3, and it's going to really plump up throughout. So when I score it, I'm going to season it very simply. I use my handy dandy all-purpose kosher salt, black pepper, coarse ground black pepper, minced garlic, dried minced garlic, and a little bit of paprika through there. And just for fun, I happened to be traveling through Iceland one time, and I picked up this volcanic black salt. It's salt. I mean, it's gonna taste like salt, but it's got a beautiful look to it. And I just never got around to using it. So just for fun, I think I'm going to use that. So there's going to be a lot of that black salt that's going to be on there too. So I'm going to let these sit out for a little while to kind of warm up, get a little bit closer to room temperature. I'm going to do my trimming, and then I'm going to do my seasoning, and we'll have it ready to go. One thing I do want to show you is that I said that I wasn't going to trim too much of the fat cap off, but after doing some trimming, I found how much of this is actually silver skin. And that's really not going to be a good bite to try to bite through that. That's a very hard membrane. And so I need to trim some of this off. Now you can see the fantastic marbling in here. There's plenty of fat. We don't necessarily need the fat cap. So there's plenty that's intramuscular fat that will help it to be nice and juicy throughout the cook. And you really want to cut off just that top layer, that silver skin, and that's the stuff that you don't want to have to bite into. So there's plenty of meat here, and when it cooks down, it's going to plump up, and it's going to be very meaty. So you're losing just a little bit, but not a ton, and that's really important to get rid of. So when you're trimming it, just get underneath it and start peeling it back, and you cut just underneath to expose it and take off the silver skin. And if you're using a good sharp knife, it shouldn't take you long at all. Now there may be some, like in this area, there's not really a lot of silver skin underneath that. I just took off where there was silver skin. Okay, I've got my charcoal started in the chimney. I like to use those fire starter kind of tumbleweeds. Makes it really good. I use a lump charcoal, and as you can see, I've got all my lump charcoal in my basket down there and some really nice looking mesquite chunks that I buy on Amazon, and or I'll use oak for beef. And once my coals are hot and ready and all just white hot, I dump it in, and we'll go to town. So while my coals are going, I'm letting these ribs sit out, get closer to room temperature, because you don't want to put them on cold on a hot smoker, because what'll happen is the outsides will cook and the insides won't, at least not as fast. And so you want to make sure that it's going to cook at a more even temperature. And in the meantime, those are all my trimmings to make my beef tallow. And here we go. Spread it out nice and evenly. I have basically multiple layers in here. Starting to get the initial smoke, which is a little whiter. And I'm going to let that kind of burn for a little bit first so I can let that smoke clean up. You may or may not have heard the term clean smoke or dirty smoke. When it's a thick smoke, it's considered dirty smoke. Once you let it start to clean up and get a little clearer, then that's clean smoke. So the clearer the smoke, the better it is for smoking, and it's less of an acrid taste on your meat. So that's what we're going for. So I'm going to let this clean up, and I'll come back out in a few minutes, and we will place the ribs. Okay, so the ribs are on. I just put them on, and you can tell that they're right in the center, bone side down. And one important thing is when you're putting in your probes, your meat probes, they have to go between the bones. So you can see them sticking out there on the side. It's important to put them between the bones because if they're too close to the bones, then the bones conduct heat. And you don't want to have a false reading about how done they are. In the meantime, you can see that those trimmings are starting to boil and render out the fat. And so the more it boils, the more fat you get out of it, more beef tallow. And we will be using that later on. And you can see what we got from the trimmings are all of these, basically almost like pork rinds, but beef. And it's just fat that's been rendered down and little bits of silver skin. These are actually excellent dog treats. There is no seasoning in there. You don't have to worry about it being full of things like garlic that they can't have. So you can have these little pieces, cut them up, and they're fantastic dog treats. They don't last very long because they're not preservatives in there or anything like that. But look at how much beef tallow I get. I mean, it's almost, it's 12 ounces worth. So that's fantastic. And I'm going to be using that later on in the cook. And it's as fresh as can be, and it's from the same cut of meat. If you've watched any of my other videos, I talk about spraying the meat to keep it cool and to help form a bark. And that's what I'm going to do right now. It's been a little bit. We're already starting to get that beautiful crust formed. You can tell that the smoke is really cleaned up. And so you're not seeing a lot of white smoke. And I use, especially for beef, I use beef stock and apple cider vinegar. Now, why do we spray? Because what we want to do is make sure that the outside doesn't cook, the bark form, and then the inside is still not cooked. because you don't want the outside to burn up. You want it to cook as evenly as possible. So the apple cider vinegar and the beef stock helps to create the crust, and it helps to also cool it down at the same time so it can even out the cooking internally and externally. And that's what we're here to do. Time for another check. Wow, that looks really great. That bark is really starting to form up nicely. We're going to spray it down, and you can also see the bones are starting to kind of peek out a little bit down here along the side, which is exactly what you want to do, what you want to see. So I'm going to keep forming that bark, cooling it down just a little bit. We'll let it continue cooking. So once the color is pretty much where I want it to be, I'm going to wrap it. Now I have to be careful when I wrap it because I don't want this to poke, this probe to poke out through the back. So I'm going to have to be careful wrapping it in a way that is not going to make it poke through, because you also don't want to be leaking the juices. And what I'm going to do, this is where that beef tallow comes in handy, because this is going to be providing extra moisture. So when you're wrapping it tight, it gives it more to be able to keep it moist, so it can help to steam in its own juices. So wrap it over like this. And this one, have to be really careful. So it's tight everywhere except for poking through, not poking through on the side. This is going to be folded over and tucked under. Yep, it's going to go back on the smoker. So back on the smoker. Make sure that all of the exhaust and the air intake is completely wide open, so that gets up to as hot as it can be, because at this point now you're not taking in any more smoke. You are basically just cooking it. So you want it to cook as quickly as possible until you get that magic 205 temperature. That's when all of the fats have been broken down, everything turns soft, and it becomes just absolutely dynamite. All right, this has been running for a while now. I'm trying to make sure that it is the top part, the meatiest part, is soft. And not finding really any resistance. That's feeling good. That's feeling good there. It's probing right about where I want it to be temperature-wise. There is a little bit of resistance over here. I think I'm at a point where I'm going to chance it. I'm going to go ahead and pull it. I'm going to put it in my bag that I rested. So this is going to go right into the oven, into a cold oven actually. And we're going to let it rest for half an hour to an hour before we cut into it. Unfortunately, at this point, my microphone apparently failed on me, and I didn't get a chance to really record anything that I was saying in this section. But basically what is occurring is I'm unwrapping everything, and after an appropriate amount of time of resting, and it was about an hour. in the oven, and it was absolutely just as soft as butter. I mean, look at how these bones just pulled right out. I mean, talk about fall off the bone. And so these ribs were just as beautiful as could be, juicy as can be. And when I'm unwrapping it, there's so much juice at the bottom of that, you can see it dripping right off of that. So I just have to be able to get that butcher paper out of the way and without losing any of the juices. And as I'm slicing into it, it's going through like a hot knife through warm butter. And take a look at how juicy that is and the smoke ring in there. It's really pretty easy to do. Just make sure that you get yourself a really good set of ribs that has a lot of great intramuscular marbling, and it will become juicy like that. So now my mom is going to be giving the initial taste test, and she's pretty impressed. And I really am right there too. We got a winner. I know it's always easy to impress your own mother, but in this case, I really did. So basically, it's an easy process. They can be a lot of fun to make, and I highly recommend that you give it a try. I hope you enjoyed watching this. Make sure you subscribe.